Welcome to the Art Against Mental Illness podcast. My name is Alex Lovelace and this is my podcast about the healing powers of art for artists, art lovers, the art curious and anyone with an interest in mental health and well-being. I'm here with Mark Burden, an old friend of mine. I think we've known each other for, about 5 years. We met when we were both a member of an art group in Windsor in the UK. Called the Windsor Art Collective, formerly known as the But Is It Art group. And me and Mark bonded on a love of sort of technology and the crossover with art, a reverence for Alan Turing, and a general fetish for square artworks. And so we've kept in touch. I've since moved up to Scotland. Mark's still in Windsor. And so I'm just going to hand over to Mark to introduce himself. And Mark, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much, Alex, for inviting me to your art and creativity for mental health podcast. You know, it's a pleasure to be here, and I just love what you're doing. And you know, to introduce myself, I mean, I think our mental health as creatives and being a creative within an ecosystem, you know, whether it's corporate or whether it's within the art world, and whether it's just in our personal lives, is really important. And I think you know, creativity gives us a lot, and we give a lot to our creative processes. And so it's a question of you know, what do artists do? I do consider myself an artist. I've been an artist for many years, and thinking back to the initial inspiration, it was stuff I did with my mum when I was, you know, before I went to school. You know, it's kind of like drawing in a little A4 pad and just making kids' drawings, and it's kind of like been a habit and practice that I've stuck with more or less ever since. And I've gone to formal art education, you know, both in the past when I was a kind of like late teenager, and just recently, um, in the last few years. And you know, part of my life journey has been around mental health well-being, and part of my life journey has been around mathematics and logic, and part of my life journey has been around this art practice that I have, and being very interested in the connections and interconnections between art, technology, and your mental and imaginative space.
Amazing. And so I noted from one of your bios that you have an MA in art and science, which
Yeah,
pretty
that's
much
right.
sums up.
MA in art and science, you know, I did a postgraduate course for 2 years. It was a part-time course, so I was working full-time within an IT role, which is essentially new service technology development. So it's kind of like leading edge stuff on the technology side, but trying to make sure that it interacts well with people and their life and gives them value. And at the same time, I was very interested. Uh, and really, this is a story since the COVID lockdown, where you're kind of like forced to look at your life and think about what you're doing, and very interested in this kind of like tech, art, science interrelationship, because that's kind of where my life was at in terms of my life journey, and figuring out that there were courses out there on the science, on the art side, that kind of like looked to that cross section, intersection of art and science. And so I applied to do an MA. It's a fine art MA at Central St Martin's, and I did 2 years studying art and science and doing my own thing. So it was great.
I mean, from my perspective, that's incredible. It's like I've had many abortive attempts at getting a degree, and sort of the intersection of the two sides of my world are very like yours. It's on one side science and technology and maths and logic. On the other side, it's art and creativity, and I think we approach combining those things in a very different way. Not always. There is definitely some overlap, but do you want to tell us how that manifests in your art?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do two things. One is I'm very intuitive, so I try not to think before I do anything, and I don't tend to have an interest or an end destination as I start out. I have a kind of like a set of ingredients in my cookbook, visual or uh, kind of mental motifs that I want to play with, and they have a particular meaning to me as well as maybe resonate with other people. And
So,
I
so
just
just sorry, I realise, Mark, that we haven't even, I mean, covered what your art actually is. So let's just rewind a bit, because we you've got quite a unique thing, approach for your art. Can you just describe that?
yeah, let me just say a few words about my artistic practice, because my artistic practice these days is really about what I consider a number of themes. One is the everyday. The other is kind of like a kind of like maths and sciencey element, and then the other part, so kind of like machines, surveillance, technology, and the other is poetry. So I kind of mash them all up together to create work. And in terms of how I do that, I might use traditional means. So I could use drawing or collage or painted elements. But most of the time, I'm using applications, art applications on my iPad to to make images. And sometimes those images stay as digital images, and sometimes they stay um, as little clips, little video clips, and sometimes they develop into prints or portfolios of prints or boxes of prints or performance of boxes of prints or longer, videos, kind of like assemblages of clips, reels, and static images, which are shown on a video screen. So that's a lot about the kind of the media I'm using. Typically, my work is small to, I would say, medium size. So for me, large size would be something like 3 foot by 3 foot, and it kind of like ranges in size. I'm quite interested in the way things, move from micro to macro, and scale up. I really like my work large. So if I was doing projected work and projected images, they could be the size of a house. And there are particular thematics, and Alex, you touched on some of those. One is an interest in Turing's work. Another is an interest in Dante's poetry, and then I've got an interest which has been I've been kind of obsessed with over the course of the last 18 months, which is related to Turing's and imitation game and intelligence test for machines, that relates to kind of AI and how we as humans are developing alien intelligence. And so, I've been incredibly intrigued with that. At the same time, my practice is grounded in my everyday, and my everyday has been for the last 4 or 5 years something that's related to chronic fatigue syndrome, and also to do with just recently, the diagnosis was changed to burnout. So again, that gives me a kind of like a perspective of life, which where art plays a particular role. Um, so creating art may not be completely therapeutic, but does have therapeutic aspects to both the artistic encounter with the viewer, and also to the artist when they're working.
So that it's insane. Well, because when I ask most people, well, you do art, what do you do? And they go, oh, well, I do all painting. Oh, what would you paint? Oh, like landscapes or something, right? And that's pretty good. I've got a good way of triangulating. It could still be quite a broad array of stuff, but the answer's pretty simple, right? I think I know what you do, but I think if people were listening to this after that description, which was a very, very detailed and adequate description of what you do, I'm still not sure they would know, right? Because your art is quite distinct, and I think the closest I can come is collage, but collage that spans multiple mediums, right? And in the real world, in the digital world, and I think if you looked at your Instagram account, your sort of digital work is very, very well suited to Instagram because it's almost all square, and so the tiled Instagram profile view always looks incredible. But it's if you looked at that, you would very much conclude you're a digital artist. And I love the idea that it spills out into every domain. And so, how do you sort of link all that together? I mean, how do you see it in terms of, say, a series of artworks when it spans perhaps physical media, digital, and things like installations and multimedia, that type of thing?
Typically, because I'm working in themes, I work in probably my work is probably project based, and therefore there's an element of sequence and series to the stuff that I do, and that work can take different forms, and it's just really as simple as that. So, um, probably the easiest example I can give is working through Dante's Divine Comedy, which is I was attracted to it during COVID because I thought, although I can't travel physically, I can travel in a mental space, and I wonder what it would be like if Dante was right and all the modern scientists were wrong. You know, it's just like we will end up in the circles of hell and purgatory and the celestial realms. So it was kind of like an interested in cutting edge science and philosophy of the medieval times, combined with Dante's love of numbers and structure and discipline in terms of how he was forming kind of squares of poems. You know, so his whole cycle is based around 10 by 10, or there's 100 cantos, and so you've got all of these squares. So I was kind of like interested in the math side as much as the science side, but I needed to make sure I wasn't thinking about the sequence in a way that wasn't giving me a fresh insight. And so I took each poem, so each of the 100 cantos, little poem songs that Dante wrote, and just did a work based around that canto, not knowing the whole cycle, although understanding that, you kind of like move from a dark place to a level of enlightenment. And the work came out of that, and it took different forms. I mean, it took print form, it took um, book form, it took video form, it took spoken word and image, and it 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 was really a combination, as you say, Alex, of collaged elements that. Or it's photo collage, it's collage, and they could be completely disparate. So the idea was to make as many disparate things fit into some kind of harmonious sequential whole, and see what happened, and go on that journey, and let other people join that journey as well.
Incredible. And did other people join that journey?
It kind of I showed the image and spoken word stuff within a lockdown British Artist Book Fair event in Bristol, and someone got their hands on it, and he turned out to be a poet who was doing his own new modern version of the Divine Comedy, and so I've been doing some work to go alongside some of his poems as he's been going on that journey, and that's been a joy to be part of. To work with a living collaborator rather than someone who's unfortunately passed away like Dante had.
That's incredible. I love it. And in terms of the words that go with your images, because again, if we sort of think about um, the Instagram, it's a very visual medium, and a lot of people won't notice the words on a place like Instagram. But obviously, I've seen various of your books, publications, your regular Christmas cards, which I'll come back to. And so the words seem to me that they are quite important to your artworks. And do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of the word thing I've just always been fascinated with, and I'm also interested in just the sounds of words. So again, within my practice, the two most recent sequences, one has been an AE sequence, which is all around the Atrocity Exhibition, which is a book written by J.G. Ballard, which he started in the 1960s, and he used a kind of like a collage process, which Burroughs used as well. In terms of just cutting up the text and seeing where it went. And I was using a similar process to create images that were inspired by the Atrocity Exhibition. And I condensed that down to the AE sound. So A, is it a scream? Is it a cry for help? Is it just a sound? And that created, that kind of work created me the opportunity to investigate, video image, and this is work that I did at Central St Martin's. Video image, static image, word, spoken word, and also text word, so printed word and image, and performative aspects of that, so mixing it all up. And the word part for me is sometimes it's very, very factual, so we can use words in a very factual way. So non-fiction, and sometimes it's more of a cut up process where it may just be repetitions of words or a more poetic play on words, and somehow they resonate. So a title will resonate with an image, and it can spin your mind into different areas. And I think the Dadaists were great at using words to destabilize the image that we were seeing to a certain extent. It may appear normal, then you look at the title and you wonder what's going on, and it creates a different mental space. So it creates a kind of like psychic resonance that takes you to a different mental space than you would do in terms of your normal encounter with the everyday. And I think that's what I'm looking for.
I just love that. There's a few things that spring to mind with what you just said. One of them is Brian Eno and his cut up technique with artists like Bowie. I think
Yeah.
Radiohead also did similar things. And then for the what was the last thing you said? It's gone from my mind. What was the last thing you just said? God, this is good. Like ADHD to the max today. Anyway,
It's
yeah. Oh
catchy.
no, it was the taking you to different mental space. So it was the oak tree. Can't remember the artist. Have you come across the oak tree before?
No, I don't
The
think
oak
I have.
tree. It might still be in the Tate Modern, but I guess it could be anywhere. Is literally a glass of water on a glass shelf set about 6 foot off the ground or something, and there's a piece of text that goes with it about why this glass of water is an oak tree, which deals directly with the themes that you've been discussing there, and sort of goes to the very core of the thesis of modern art, especially since the Dadaists, but I don't think they were quite the first to it, but they were the first to call it out explicitly. And I just love that side of things. And, I'm sort of getting more and more into abstract. So that's sort of becoming a bit more of a theme for me. So I really think that's all absolutely fascinating, and I could talk about it all day. Maybe we'll do that. Just want to come back to your experience at going back to uni quite late in life. How, obviously you'd been doing art for quite a long time before that. You had a career and so on. And And so, how did you find that experience? How do you think it sort of changed you? Did it develop you as an artist? And um, and sort of why, given that you did it quite late in life, what was the motivation there? And did you find yourself
Uh,
surrounded by really young people as well? Were you? Was it a mature course? Were you mixed with younger folks too?
no, I mean it's interesting. Probably in terms of the breakdown, there were uh, s- probably about 10% who were older, more mature students. So when I say old, I mean like 50s plus. And then, of course, you had a wide range because it's an MA. You're having people in their 20s, but mainly I would say a group of people would be in their 20s and 30s. So again, they weren't fresh out of high school education or anything like that. So everyone was coming to the program in quite a mature way. So in that sense, I didn't find it that being an older guy was particularly, it was just part of the polarity. There were probably more women. In fact, there were more women than men on the course, as you'd find in mainly uh, mainstream art education in the UK. And but no, I mean, it was everyone was coming from a different background. So you had people that were um, not practicing artists originally, but had an interest in art and were wanting to develop a visual communication to some of the stuff that they were doing in the past. Whether it was from a more purely scientific background or whether it was scientific administration or anything like that. So a wide range of different um, career paths for people that were maybe in the mainly in the 20s to 40s.
And so, how do you think that affected your art practice?
I think it just widen it up. When you're exposed to um, different things, I mean, the rule of thumb that I took was I don't want to do what I've done before at art school. Yet again, so it wasn't a question of thinking, well, I've done this and I'll do a bit more of it. It was just like being open to the experience of doing something different and seeing what that different turned out to be. So my rule of thumb was if I've done something like this before, I should cross it off my list of things to do now. And that was part and parcel of it. The second part was during, as I started the course, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue. So I thought, can I do a full time job and do this at the same time? And the answer was probably, the simple logical answer would probably be no. But I carried on doing it because I wanted to do it. And then I had COVID in the first year that I was there, in the March term, the spring term, and that just completely whacked me out. So I had post-COVID symptoms, and anything that I was planning to do just got put on the back burner, and it forced me to think about stuff in a different way. And I was in a when you've got COVID or when you've got chronic fatigue, you can't really think about art in the same way. Your brain is not really able to process that much. And so you have to kind of like concentrate on getting from the bed to the sofa and then back again and having enough nutrition in the day. But when I was doing that, I couldn't watch TV, couldn't read a book. But what I could do was just look out the window and draw what was in front of me. And that's what I ended up doing. So I had a whole series of surveillance images that weren't really to do with art school, but were really to do with what my everyday life was like at the time, just looking out the window, and probably that was about it. And I developed that by looking at bits of my everyday life under a microscope and doing drawings of what I could see under the microscope as well. So it's just really exploring what my everyday was. But you're looking at that from an academic perspective as well. So having to think about writing a thesis, writing an essay, which was a topic of choice. And my topic of choice was really the intelligence of machines, through Alan Turing's work and also through Marcel Duchamp's Dadaist work, the large glass, which is an image, a strange image on glass, which shows intelligent machines communicating with each other and having emotions between each other as well. The male and female machines. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and I think you just mix things up and go to places that you wouldn't go otherwise because you're talking to people and meeting people and seeing different things from what you would do normally. But on the other side, a lot of the stuff was really grounded in my everyday, and the atrocity exhibition inspired work was really just as much about me watching TV images, TV images about JFK and doing some research on some of that stuff. The visual kind of like overstimulation of what we see on TV.
Crazy.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
completely
that's
crazy.
incredible. Yeah, you're mad. You're bonkers. It really, really is interesting. And I remember a lot of your stuff. I mean, your black and white digital images, just of bits of stuff you've seen outside the window and stuff. And honestly, that was my favorite of your stuff ever. I absolutely loved it. Just this idea of the sort of the haunting mundanity, liminal spaces, and just that, suburban life in a surveillance culture and all these things, and you can read so much into them, and you can take them however you want. But given I found them really haunting, right? I did, but like in a sort of beautiful way, and I think they're incredible, and they look great in a big grid.
Yeah, they do look really great. I mean, and again, those images probably haven't been seen that much. So a lot of the work I do doesn't really get seen as much as I like it to, and I like the idea of big grids. I'm thinking about how to do those kind of installations online in a virtual space, because sometimes it's difficult to get the physical space, but you can still get an impression, and you can still use that to manifest a physical space to put the stuff in. And so the black and white work, the observational work, I would call that as a surveillance theme, and sometimes that's inside the house or inside an environment, and sometimes it's just walking around and seeing what happens. So that's kind of part of my practice, observing what's around in the everyday and thinking about the stuff that people don't typically post as a stuff of worthy on Instagram. So there's a level of banality about it, it's the everyday banal.
Yeah, and that's such a juxtapose to all the selfies in front of the Taj Mahal or whatever people are doing,
That's wonderful.
which gets, that's what's become mundane. And what's interesting is the stuff that people don't spend any time looking at. And so your grids of squares, were a huge influence on me. I was just mesmerised by the uniformity of it, but the stories you could tell with sort of slightly anonymous, individual pictures that stand alone tell one story, that put together tell a completely different story. And so I started, as you've seen, doing a whole bunch of square artworks myself at varying sizes. I did manage to make a physical grid.
Yeah, it was
I
wonderful.
literally built it.
Yeah,
I built it
and
out of
wonderful
wood,
stuff.
because if I try to hang them, I just couldn't get them to, even on hanging wires, I couldn't get them to hang in a sort of, in a nicely geometric, well spaced way. So I built a couple of frames and managed to get them up on the wall in the exhibition I did in the cinema next door to me. So that was actually in part a homage to you, Mark. So there you go.
Well, thank you very, very
My
much.
little
No, I thought it was,
altar to the work of Mark Burden.
yeah. Well, I mean, it was just a wonderful grid, and I just loved seeing it, Alex. And I thought, independent of my influence or lack of influence on your work. I mean, it was just a super piece of work. And I think when we're looking at grids, and we could talk about grids probably for a week if we wanted to, there's something that's particular to the human condition about grids. As soon as you see a straight line, you know a human's been around. And, as soon as you see a grid, you also know a human's been around. And what we see within our social media, what we're seeing within any kind of, technology media is a series of grids. And I think it's just part of our commonplace, part of our contemporary everyday, something that would not have been usual for anyone apart from folks living in the 21st century.
Yeah, don't get me started. Right, I've got grids now. I'm going for grids on my podcast. So, right, I've derailed myself. So let's talk. Well, so talking about our art reflecting each other's, we've both depicted Alan Turing. I've only done it once, but you have lots. But the funny thing about my depiction of Alan Turing, in a slightly meta and recursive way, actually includes one of your pictures of Alan Turing as part of the collage behind the
Yeah.
portrait. We've both got, I think, a healthy reverence of I guess, what would you call him, the godfather, grandfather of computing, or the progenitor of computing. And I think that it was obvious that those two things were going to be combined with people like us. My Turing painting is housed on a wall of a couple of IT nerds in Sydney, Australia,
Wonderful.
which I find quite an amusing concept. But what are your thoughts on Alan Turing? He turns up in your work basically everywhere.
He's kind of in, even if he's not appearing directly, he's in the background. And probably if I'd have known about Alan Turing when I was at, high school, I would have focused more on mathematics than art. That's how powerful Turing's influence is on me. And one of the things I was really fortunate to do, following and being part of the Central St Martin's in Art and Science, was to get a collaboration with the University of Durham, University of Durham, and the Bioscience Institute up there, and they paired me up with a mathematician called Andrew Krauss, who's developed this wonderful app that's based around Turing's mathematical model for morphogenesis. So the kind of like the things that we see in nature, you could see stripes on a zebra. And why do they morph in the way they do? You could look at it in zebrafish as well. This little fish that kind of like dart around the ocean. But this kind of like,
Can I just stop you for a bit there? So morphogenesis, can you just elaborate on what that means for our less
yeah,
scientifically orientated listeners?
for those, I mean, so I'm not able to understand the maths of Alan Turing. So Alan Turing was really fascinated by why nature is like it is, and he thought there was a mathematical principle underneath a lot of nature. And when you see the picture that his mum did, there's a little drawing that his mum did when Alan Turing was at school. He was supposed to be in a hockey match, and there you can see his mum drawing him looking and staring at the daisies. And he was probably doing something like counting the petals or something daft like that. But he was absolutely fascinated by this link to numbers in nature. And you can see it in the Fibonacci series. So the Fibonacci series is where you get two numbers in the sequence. You start out with 1 and 1, you add them together to get 2, and then you take 2 and the last number in the sequence, 1, and then it equals 3. So Alan Turing was always fascinated by Fibonacci and this number series that, when you look at it, it's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. And it's the same theorem that you can see in the golden section. You see it in Leonardo's work. You see it in a lot of the Renaissance work where they, figured out what one single point perspective was and on what this golden section was. And it's essentially, it's the harmonics of our face. It's the harmonics of the natural world. So Turing was really interested in this, and he met up with a lady that's in the Imitation Game film, Joan Clark, as she was at the time, and they had discussions in their Bletchley Park breaks where they were cracking the code of the German Enigma, but they were talking about cracking the code of nature in terms of mathematical modelling. And so morphogenesis is a way of doing mathematical modelling to nature. And Turing was first looking at something very, very simple. And so you've got things like Frisian cows, the cows with the black and white patches over them. And he spent an incredible amount of time trying to figure out what the mathematical calculation and formula was for why those cow shapes were kind of like randomized. So instead of just being spots, they were kind of like abstract, splurgy spots. And that really is my simple story around what morphogenesis is.
That is so cool. And I'm now not going to look at cows the same way again. But I guess back to your original comment about zebra stripes. And so I'm assuming that all zebra stripes are different, like a fingerprint and like the iris of the eye, the human eye, and so on. In fact, fingerprints. And of course, there's some mathematical grounding to that. But I think one of the things for me, my maths is okay, but good enough that I need to do my job.
Yeah.
My mental arithmetic is non-existent, but I see an obvious, clear, and distinct overlap between art and maths because maths is fundamentally a creative endeavor. The moment you get into the more brutal edges of it. And I did an episode which started off talking about Fermat's last theorem
Yeah, wonderful.
earlier this year. Yeah, and for me, there's the really important mathematicians all say the same thing: is that the right proof for a mathematical problem is it's right because it's beautiful, it's elegant.
Yeah.
And I find and it sort of reflects the idea that yes, of course, nature is beautiful, and mathematics is the language of nature, really, and so it should be beautiful too, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the time, I think if you've got a mathematical bent, you're looking for the formula underneath the surface. Why does something look like it does? It's not because you can really appreciate the randomness and complexity on the surface, is because you can understand that there's a model underneath. And the model, as a great mathematician, George Bloch, said, every model is wrong, but some are useful. And so, I think what we have with mathematical theorems is something that are beautiful because they condense the complexity of the world and the universe, or an imaginative logical space into something that is understandable and clear and simple. It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing.
I couldn't agree more. Right, so let's bring this one back to the here and now. And so you've experienced a period of burnout. I can empathise with that greatly. I think you're quite like me in that your brain is never quiet. And so how do you feel that your art practice is helping your recovery? Hopefully you're recovering from burnout.
I think the art practice, and again, it's not about results, it's about getting there and doing something. I can't really, I've got my own way of gauging what I think is interesting and what I'm curious about at a particular point in time. But the process of making something in whatever media is a kind of way of articulating a response and a reaction to something in life. And even the most abstract of artists will still be responding to something. It's a reaction. Art is a reaction to something, and the art practice is the creation of something that other people may call art. They may call it good, bad, or ugly art. It doesn't really matter, but it's something that exists outside of our mental space. It's got a physical reality. Even if it's a performative piece, you still end up with a level of documentation. So it's this kind of like this transition of taking stuff that you may not, you may have in your head, or there may be threads in your head that you're putting into a manifestation in some form of media. And I think that whole process is very empowering, completely mesmerizing, and full of surprises. And I think that's the kind of thing that is very life affirming. It gives us a sense of control. It may be a very limited sphere of control, but it gives us a sense of control, a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, and a sense of curiosity. What happens if I do this next? What happens if I did, green instead of red, or whatever? And it can be very, very simple, or it can be, highly complex, where you're dealing with what happens with a particular idea. If I place that idea in combination with another idea, what happens? So I think
That's
all of
yes.
that is just really, really important, and it means that your mind and your body and your soul are engaged in something other than uh, the mundaneness and the banality of everyday life, and you're lifting it to a higher level. So for me, that is really important in terms of uh, being in some way in control of your own destiny. And art is not a process of it's a process for me of discovery and curiosity. It's not about an end point necessarily, but that I think is very life affirming, and I think it's really important to um, find those aspects of creativity in our lives, because it gives us meaning and it gives us purpose. And for me, that's been a significant part of my recovery. And even if I'm looking at things like, magpies connecting stuff for their nests, they'll pick up the most crazy things to carry across from, the roof to the tree where they're building their nest. And it just shows that creativity is not just a human attribute. It exists within the plant and animal kingdom as well, and it's something that we all need to find a way of tapping into to connect to the universe, and something that's wider than ourselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've recorded a bunch of videos for my YouTube channel, and some of them are me walking around my local woods just looking at
Yeah,
stuff. I doubt anyone wants to watch this crap, but I'm like, oh, look at this! Oh, there's a bird. There's
yeah,
look at this tree. Isn't this tree awesome? And part of the reason I do it is because I can get into my own head when I'm wandering around, and um, I sometimes I'll slap on a podcast or an audio book. Sometimes I'll listen to music, and my brain wanders. And I've walked for a mile and I haven't noticed anything. And so what this does actually is forces me to to look. And then what I found actually, sort of a valuable use of having these horrible glowing rectangles we keep in our pockets is that actually if I feel like I want to share something, it makes me more alert to what's around me, and I might pull it out and take a picture, but I've noticed it. You know what I mean? And that's really important to me because I can miss stuff. My brain never shuts up. And but I get really excited and I find it really satisfying to sort of see and observe the world around me. And I think art is a really good way of making me do that. And I really love the comments around control because that resonates with me massively right now because I I lost a lot of control over my life, over the last year, and it really does feel like the art is one thing I do have control over, and that's why I think part of the reason I find it so calming and therapeutic, and that's it's a really interesting aspect of it that I'm definitely going to drill more down on in the coming weeks.
I think
So,
the aspect of just being curious about our everyday is something that I was very, it's still something that is part of my practice. So the everyday is part of my practice, and sometimes I would just go down the street with my little screen, my mobile camera, and it will just be I'll walk. I need to walk 100 steps or 150 steps, and then I need to look to the left, and I'll take an image of what I find interesting. So instead of blanking it out, I'll actually try and consciously, within the space of time where you're not able to consciously think about why you like it or why you don't, and is it art or is it not art? It's just something that you find of interest. And so you can kind of like do that walk, looking at the sky, looking at the ground, looking at left to right or whatever, and you end up with this kind of like collage and condensation of your walk. And your walk is a kind of like it's a completely metaphysical activity, which is completely unique to you. You're in your own body, but you're also in your own mind. So you can be thinking about, I don't know, anything in the world or anything out of this world at the same time as being placed in this physical location, which is completely specific, to this moving planet. And most of the time we're not really conscious of what's going on. We blank it out, and I think art and observation can be very interesting ways of trying to reconnect to just what it's like being alive on this planet today.
holy cow! So here you have it, folks. The metaphysics of walking to the shop to buy a pint of
Yeah,
milk, right?
yeah.
Uh, I, I mean, it's very zen, and I love it. And I can again talk about this all day. I'm going to start drawing this to a close, though, and I
Good for
really,
you.
really don't want to. So we'll do this again. Um, so just coming up to this time of the year, um, one of the regular fixtures of my Christmas is Christmas cards from you. I always feel incredibly guilty. I stopped doing Christmas cards of any sort decades ago, and I have nothing like the discipline to be able to start making works of art to send to friends and family at Christmas. But this is exactly what you do, and your Christmas cards, for want of a better word, are mini works of, well, they're just works of art. They're fabulous. They're one thing that perhaps isn't clear about Mark's work if you only see it digitally is that when you get the physical piece, it's beautiful, high quality products, high quality materials, um, highly precisely assembled, and completely unique. So I'm not talking about Santa and his reindeers, depicted on the front of a
We
bit
can
of
show you.
card from
We
Hallmark.
could do a little. We could do a little. This is my 2024 Christmas art drop, and so it's a combo of Mona Lisa with a little bit of abstraction in a way in red and green, and then it gets then. So that's really cool, and you get a lot of. You can see that's Mona Lisa in the background, so it's got a bit of Da
Yeah.
Vinci. Then you get a layer of this on the top, which shows the
Oh,
golden
for God's
section.
sake.
So you can see that
Oh,
really
wow.
it's not just that. Then you get a bit of text on the back that you won't be able to read, but this says Leonardo da Vinci used the mathematical Fibonacci pattern to create the Mona Lisa. So when you're looking at the Mona Lisa, it's not just a painting of a person; it's actually a mathematical construct as well. And you've got Vasari saying, in this work of Leonardo, there was a smile so pleasing that it was a thing more divine than human to behold. It was not other than alive. And then when you think about what we're doing at the moment, you've got mathematical patterns, non-organic forms of intelligence, and used surveillance are attributes of AI, so artificial intelligence. So therefore, is it logical to consider Mona Lisa to be an early ancestor and precursor of artificial intelligence? So you get that.
Oh my God. Right.
And then you've
Oh my
got
God.
this piece of work is kind of like an assemblage. So you get that, and it's got a little black sheet of paper with my little stamp on. It covers up this, so you can see how the Fibonacci relates to Mona Lisa, and then within the little package, which all fits into an A5 envelope, so it's all cheap and cheerful, you get a certificate of authentication as well, plus a
Oh my
little
God.
bit of Christmas message handwritten by me, and that's the only part that I'm really doing. So you get my signature and any little
I
word.
mean, there's a bit of Warhol there, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
they're always a pleasure. I mean, ultimately, you have to make friends with Mark so that he'll send you one of his Christmas cards, which I'm sure are going to be worth lots of money in the future. Um, I do find so I went to see the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. I'm sure you've done it yourself. And what struck me about it is I had to queue up, and then you sort of get to see it, and there's a bunch of like tourists in front of it with cameras and camera phones and stuff. So most of your view of the Mona Lisa is obscured by little electronic rectangles of people taking photos of it, of themselves obscuring the Mona Lisa. So it can't be properly seen in their photo, and it just struck me as being so very modern and bizarre
Yeah.
that, and I really hate queues and I really hate crowds. So it was such a
It's a pilgrimage,
confusing and
a pilgrimage to something that was highly contemporary and not just the Mona Lisa.
well, I think it was an artwork in itself, right? I
Yes,
think that the scene was an artwork, and I don't think anyone realised that they were part of this big piece of performance art. And it's so recursive, especially when you get into the realms of Dan Brown and stuff like
yeah.
that. And as much as all of that's made up nonsense, there is some facts and truth in that. And the Mona Lisa as a piece of culture has accumulated so many extra layers, and that's really interesting about your own work, where it's got your Christmas card, where it's got the layers on top. You've got a digital layer and a physical layer, and then the whole golden ratio and things like that. I just think Mona Lisa as a painting itself, I have no interest in. I have a lot of interest in the culture that surrounds it right up to this very day. It's absolutely fascinating.
But I guess we're drawing to a close, and I think
Yes,
we could carry on talking for a lot longer, Alex. And
I, I, I really, really will.
it's always a delight to
So
talk to you and to catch up. So thank you for inviting me. And
it's quite all
hope,
right. Can you tell us where to find you on the interwebs?
I've got a website which is www. Uh, markb.space. So that's my website. And if you're looking for my Instagram, it's Mark Burden. That's MarkBurden _art. So,
And what you
feel free to follow me and feel free to drop into my website. What I'm planning to do in 2025 is to do some virtual exhibitions on my website. So it has been lacking a little bit of TLC for the last couple of years because I've just been too busy to do too much else. But you'll see some changes, and you'll see that I'll be making it much easier for people to buy work from me rather than making it quite difficult at times.
or just become friends with you, and that you'll send people your artwork for Christmas for free. You should start charging. I'm going to auction it off, and
Oh
then
yeah,
you'll be
you can
jealous.
see how much it goes for, but it's the work that I produce, I think, has got a very high value. It may not have a high price at the moment, but it will do over time.
I'm sure it will. So I'm going to hold on to it for the moment as an investment in the future. Okay. Well, this has been so interesting as ever. Every time we talk, Mark, it's always absolutely fascinating. You say so many incredible things, and I sort of think that we should just record everything we say to each other, because it's always going to be interesting and useful to reflect on. So thanks for your time. Enjoy your Christmas, and we will definitely talk again. Maybe we should start our own podcast, because we simply can't stop talking most of the time. So it's,
No, I mean, I'm just fascinated by your practice, Alex. I'm fascinated by what you're doing with art and mental health. I think it's so vitally important, and it's it brings something else to our social media space. So I really appreciate what you're doing. I really love the work you're doing. I think it just continues to develop and evolve. And yeah, I'm looking forward to collaborating and meeting up in the new year in some shape or form. And thank you very very
yes,
much for inviting me today.
brilliant. Absolutely. Thank you very much, and we'll speak soon. Bye.
Bye bye.